everybody.
Hi, everybody.
This is our second full ecology update, something we'll do monthly.
On a
With
beautiful day in Bozeman, south of Bozeman, in the foothills of the Gallatin, 75 degrees. Wow,
Yeah,
we kind of like this.
we've just taken a long hike. Feel really lucky to be doing isolation out here in this big wide Gallatin Valley. But as promised, what we're doing with this monthly update is bringing you some of the newest information that's come across through our office in the month between. And so, following up on our April update, we're bringing the May one. And Gary has been reading, in particular, a lot of evolutionary biology.
The theme is evolution. A couple things come to mind right off the bat. First of all, this notion that's really starting to gain more and more traction as the years go on, of survival of the friendliest. Whereas we've spent a lot of time thinking, oh, the ones that survive in nature are the fiercest and the biggest and the baddest. And in fact, that's never been the case. But not only has that never been the case, but now we really have a growing appreciation for the fact that alliances really mean a lot. I've said this before, but even Darwin said that perhaps the greatest human capacity that allows humans to succeed as well as they do is the ability to cooperate and the ability to be in sympathy with other beings, especially with other humans.
One of the things that we're coming to understand is that the reason human beings have made it as far as we have is because, as he was suggesting, we're essentially cooperative. It doesn't look that way in the headlines. It doesn't look that way in what we see in social media and in the news media. We are led to understand that we are quite polarized and contentious, and certainly in many ways we are. But this is another thing for us to all slow down and consider. Um, it's quite likely, oh, I get a critter. It's quite likely that we wouldn't be able to have the kind of response that we're having to the current crisis were we not essentially able to cooperate with each other. We can throw up all sorts of barriers, but essentially we're cooperating. And the other thing that we're doing is relying on one another socially. And now we know that it makes a big difference to our physiology to have face to face contact with people. And that's being much harder in these days. But face to face contact is part of being in cooperation and functioning in the best interest of the most people.
Which brings to mind another really important aspect of evolution, our continuing effort to understand how that has worked out as far as life on Earth, is that we're beginning to sense that evolution wasn't just the result of random mutations of genes, but it was actually also influenced heavily by how well organisms and systems of related organisms handled disruption. In other words, the history of life on Earth could be said to be a path from one pretty big disruption to the next. And the life forms that really succeeded and thrived were those that were able to be in and process that disruption in a way that ultimately made a lot of them even stronger on the far side of it.
So you can probably take a bit of a look back at your own life. And no matter how old you are, as you watch this video or navigate through this weirdness of our times, the fact is, you have dealt with disappointment, you have dealt with disruption. It's the nature of life. And so we are learning this from evolution that those species that do well cooperate. They also prepare themselves to, what do you say, to minimize blunt trauma?
Yeah, there are two things that seem to be present in any system or life form that tends to do okay in the wake of disruption. The first is to develop in a way that you can withstand the force of blunt trauma. So in nature, you might think of a ponderosa pine in a wildfire zone that has thick bark to protect its inner layers from damage, and that will also drop its limbs so that when fires come through, they won't climb the ladder of those limbs, hit the crown, and kill the tree. So you find ways to minimize the blunt force of the trauma. And the second thing is to make sure you come out on the other side of that trauma with certain essentials necessary for your new life intact. In the case of a forest, it might be the seeds that were able to withstand the fire, like of lodgepole pine. It can be the microorganisms in the soil. It can be the existence of pollinators nearby to come and pollinate the first plants to come up. So withstand the blunt trauma and keep possession of those things that are going to be most important for you to put your life back together again.
And so, like, if you focus on the microbes, if you focus on the mycorrhizal networks, the fungal networks that connect trees, those come into full swing. They're in full swing all the time, but they come into full swing in recovery from a healthy forest fire. For us, when we are encountering big disruptions in our lives, it feels like it's happening just to us, and often it is happening just to us. But as soon as we can find ways to reach out to other people, to remember, to remind ourselves that we're not nuts, it really is tumultuous, perhaps, uncomfortable, confusing, baffling, horrible to go through disruption. And there are other people in our lives who can say, yes, in fact, your life has been disrupted. You're not crazy to feel this way. And together, we can support your recovery and the recovery of all of us, the resilience of all of us. This is no joke. This is why it's very important for us to have healthy social ecologies. Because as we go forward as a species, that's actually what's made it possible for us to survive from the first time we joined together in villages and communities, perhaps before that.
Right. So our great strength is our ability and willingness to connect, and that strength is never needed more than when disruption comes along. So this is the time to dust off our proclivity toward connection and empathy and caring for one another.
Another feature that has come that Gary's mentioned from all of his reading and that I've been considering more deeply as well is what happened when we stood up. Something happened when our species, which is part of what set us apart, is that we stood up on our two back legs and we started making our way around the planet that way. Several things happened physiologically, anatomically, and certainly in the way that we came to perceive and navigate through the world. And one of them has to do with birth. Is that right?
Yeah, when you're more of a four-legged creature, you tend to have the females of any given species, we're talking about primates in this case, tend to have wide hips, and that makes for easier birthing process. But if you go upright, as humans eventually did, it's a problem for movement on two legs to have those hips so far apart. So what evolutionary biologists think happened is over time the hips space of the females began to narrow, and birth therefore became more difficult and more risky. And it is to this day. We have far more risk as humans giving birth to babies than any other species we know of,
Any other animal that
any
we
other
know of?
animal.
Hmm.
And so finally, the way to accommodate that narrowing of the hip space was to give birth to babies that did not have their brains fully developed so they could fit through the birth canal. And so most of the growth and acquisition of gray matter, if you will, with humans happens, or a significant degree of it happens after birth. So we learn and grow and change and add to our brain capacity after we're in this world.
And so that is another bit for us to take with us as we proceed through this wild time. And as we, Gary and I are very interested in all of us taking a deeper look at the fullness of our ecology, at this possibility of reclaiming the fullness of our human nature, ourselves as nature, in nature. So consider this: since our species has been our species, that is, walking around on two legs, for most of that time, the babies that have been born with most of their brain development happening postpartum, happening out in and up next to the natural world, such as it was represented by the family they were born into, the conditions that they were born into. And so all of that is in nature. It's in human society as it's changed over time. But when that question comes forward that's so central in psychology, in the history of psychology, are we more affected by nature or more affected by nurture? Well, this asks the question all over again because nature is used to signify genetics and nurture is used to signify human society or the interaction of the individual with the environment. So we are suggesting that we humans, by virtue of this narrowing of the hips and the necessity of baby humans to do most of their brain development postpartum, that we are profoundly affected by nurture, by the nurture of the natural world in as it is expressed through families. Play with that. That's just me running with it and being kind of fascinated by what is essentially a new fact for me.
Gosh, that's a lot to play with. I love it.
Yeah,
I'm going to keep playing with it.
I think so. So there we are. That's our little a big connection. We talk about this stuff all the time. And so that's what, in between one monthly update to the next, we are challenging ourselves with brand new information and interested in using our time to synthesize it a bit and offering from one month to the next to you. As always, we invite you to check out our website at fullecology.com and to write us with any questions or comments or connections, that's good, corrections or complaints at connect at fullecology.com. We have we're working right now on developing courses. You want to say a little bit about the volunteers we're working with?
Well, we've had a wonderful group of volunteers who we're staying in touch with via Zoom meetings once a week over 5 weeks, and really fleshing out a lot of the potential pathways that we'll probably end up exploring in not just the next year, but probably several years to come. So we're excited to see this sort of group effort get traction and start to move. Lots to stay in touch with you about as the months go by.
So yes, we're planning on offering live classes with the two of us and a limited number of folks here soon. And we're pretty sure also we'll be putting up video shortened versions of those courses for people who would like to gain access to pre-recorded information. We're also working on getting the infrastructure together for a membership that will include access ultimately to this to not this update, this will always be available, but to the monthly live stream, which, by the way, check if you can write on your schedules that the 5th of May, Tuesday evening at 6 o'clock Mountain Time, so you can translate for wherever you are. Gary and I will be doing the live stream conversation, which we call the Full Ecology Deep Dive, on Facebook this time, on the Full Ecology Facebook page. If you haven't seen that, you can check that out as well. So over time, we'll have more to tell you about what's included in the membership, how that works. We're calling it the Full Ecology Connection.
Find out more on our website.
Yeah, and thanks for joining us. Have a really good month. It doesn't, I don't know how it feels to you. Sometimes to me, it feels like, oh, I don't know if I can do this anymore. But the fact is, this, whatever it is outside your window, it has our back. It really does. But don't believe us. Check it out.
Be well and savor spring.
Yes. Until next month.
Bye for now.